Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. This week on the podcast, it's something a little different. I am sharing with you the recording of my talk at the Wild Roses Women's Festival from this summer. I hope that you enjoy. Hey Woo Crew, Eileen here. Is there a whispering inside you that life is meant for more magic, more embodied meaning, more connection with your intuition? If so, I want to invite you on a journey. I am once again opening the doors to Unleash Your Inner Witch, a beginner's course in witchcraft for the woo curious. Over the course of 6 weeks, we'll gather in small, intimate circle so you can explore tools like ritual, tarot, crystals, pendulum use, communing with your ancestors, connecting with spirit guides, altar building, cyclical living, and more. It's not about doing all the things. This course is really about coming home to yourself, trusting your inner knowing, weaving simplicity into daily magic. It's a way of being in the world. And whether you already feel drawn to magic but haven't been sure how to practice it, maybe you're curious but skeptical, or maybe you're a seasoned practitioner but you want to deepen your connection with self and in community, this container is for you. We'll meet live once a week for 6 weeks to connect. All calls are, of course, recorded in case you can't attend live. The group is small, maximum 12 women, to keep things intimate and safe. You get a workbook, you get a group chat to stay connected, and lifetime access to these recordings. If you're ready to step into more enchantment, deeper trust in yourself, and a life touched by ritual and meaning, I'd be honored to walk with you. The doors are open. Head on over to myluminouslife.ca/unleashyourinnerwitch to learn more and to sign up. Let's unleash your inner witch together. Welcome this morning to the Courage to Rest. When I saw the schedule, I laughed because I was like, you put the rest talk on at 8 a.m. after the dance? So thank you so much for being here, for being up. We're grateful for this tent with the drizzle. I know it's not warm, but I'm so appreciative that each of you made the choice to get out of bed and come join me here this morning. My name is Eileen, and if you've gotten one of my cards, you'll have seen I am a spiritual coach, I'm an energy healer, and I'm a witch. I call myself a slow living witch, and I like to caveat that by saying I'm working towards slow living, because a big part of my work and what I'm going to share with you today is decoupling from hustle culture, from extractive, exploitative capitalism, patriarchy, all of that good stuff that keeps us in a state of stress and busy and go, and makes it really hard to rest. And before I drop in, I also really want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're on. And most of us here under this tent, glancing around, are white settlers on this land. And I know that I speak for all of us when I say that we are grateful to the ancestors of this land, the indigenous first peoples of this nation, of Turtle Island, of so-called Canada.
for their stewardship, their tending, their reciprocity with the land, the connection, the kinship. So I'm really honored to call Alberta home, even though it's not where my people are from originally. And for the Wild Roses Festival, for making it possible for us all to be here and for acknowledging the magic that comes from being on the land and with the land and having elders present and all of that stuff. So yeah, thank you. I would love to start us off today, because this is a talk about rest, by just taking a few moments for us all to land here in our bodies with the earth. And so I'm going to invite you to just place one hand on your chest and one on your belly, if you can. It's all good if you're eating or drinking. And just taking a moment, if it feels comfortable, to gently close your eyes or have a soft gaze downwards if that feels safer. And just tuning into your breathing and allowing your breath to flow gently and softly in and out of your body. No need to change your breathing at all. Just let it be. Let it fill your belly. Let it soften your shoulders. And let it anchor you into the earth that holds us. You all chose to be here this morning because something about this talk resonated with you. Something about those words, courage to rest, called you here. And I believe that it is more important now than ever that we reclaim our right to rest and find the courage to do so, specifically as women. Lots of the presenters here this weekend have spoken about patriarchy and hustle and busy and burnout and reconnecting with your inner truth and wisdom. And the theme continues today. I sign off every email with "Rested women will change the world." And the burnout that we are collectively facing, which is increasing year after year, it disproportionately affects women and female identifying folks in our communities. It is literally killing us, and it's killing the planet. We know that stress and all of those hormones that come with it increase our risk for heart disease, for obesity, for diabetes, for all of these things that impact our health, impacts generations to come. And it's coupled with that extractive capitalism that we live within that is disregarding the well-being of our planet. And the bind that we find ourselves in is that we're living in a system that is requiring of us to be on all the time, to hustle hard, to push, because otherwise we find ourselves in a place of scarcity. It's keeping us exhausted, which keeps us out of our power, which makes it really hard to do anything to change it. So reclaiming rest, and today is going to be a little bit about teaching about why it's so damn hard to rest, especially as women. It's going to be some practical tools to help you incorporate more rest, and it doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be, 2-hour naps in the afternoon, though if you can do that, that's great. And it's also going to be tapping into the wisdom of the earth and the seasons, because that's a huge part of the work that I do and where I have found so much permission to be able to rest. But first I'll share a little bit of my story, which always feels a bit like, oh, I'm talking about myself. So, but it's important because we connect as people, as humans, we connect through storytelling. We find parts of ourselves in others, and that's where things land and stick with us. So what brought me here speaking to you today? If I had told myself 5 years ago that I'd be sitting at a women's festival under a tent speaking about spirituality and rest and cyclical living and witchcraft, that'll come into, I would have laughed in your face. 5 years ago, I was an atheist. I was a midwife, so there was probably some hints there that witchcraft was coming, but I would have told you on the surface that, like, no, I don't believe in anything. When we die, we're dead. We're here while we're here, and that's it. I was a people pleaser, a perfectionist, a straight A student, a hyper independent high achiever my whole life. In addition, I very much grew up feeling like it was my responsibility to take care of everybody around me, manage emotions, manage well-being, give of myself all the time. And it landed me for many years in a marriage that began to literally burn me up from the inside. I started to have heartburn about 5 years into that relationship. It progressively got worse and worse and worse to the point that I was on prescription medication to manage it. And I remember telling my mom, I was like, oh, like, I'm getting heartburn now. I'm 30 or whatever age I was. And she's like, oh, I only get heartburn when I'm stressed. I was like, I'm not stressed. Full-time midwife. Relationship I knew was not great for me. I ran out of that medication a few days after I left my husband, and I've had heartburn 5 times since then. That was 6 years ago. So that was like my first big sign, reminder, pointer that our bodies are so wise, and they are always telling us things, and they will whisper, and then they'll get louder, and eventually they'll start yelling. And so part of the journey and part of tapping into rest is recognizing and slowing down enough to hear the whispers, to listen to her. And then the work is to begin believing her and acting on what you're hearing, which is also hard to do. I worked in my career as a midwife for a few years past when I left my husband. I had a bit of a resurgence of feeling like I could continue to hold that space that midwifery requires of us. Once I wasn't managing his emotions all the time and walking on eggshells and feeling like I couldn't have my own opinions, I felt like I loved my job again, and then COVID hit. And I quickly realized that while I loved the work, and I still do, I dearly miss midwifery in a lot of ways. The fact that this phone has been on silent for the last few years is is a blessing. I quickly realized when COVID hit that all of the things I did to fill my cup were gone, and I couldn't keep doing that job. And so I started to look around for a way out. I was in this culture, which exists in so many places, of toxic hustle, even in a career that's supposed to be about, slow birth, natural, being with women. There was still this competitiveness between the women I worked with, this sense of no matter how hard you had worked, somebody had worked harder. I remember sitting at the nurse's station one morning after a night of 4 births, 3 of them at home. Don't ask how this all worked out. That's an amazing number to actually get to from, I think my first call was at 4 p.m. and this was maybe 6 or 7 a.m. the next day, and I'd had 4 babies during that time. And turning to the midwife beside me and being like, holy crow, that was a lot. And she was like, well, I once did 5 births in less hours. And I was like, okay. Okay, this is the culture we're in, right? We're in this culture of competitiveness. Even growing up, I flashback to my teenage years when my best friend would come to my house and pick me up on the way to school, and I'd get in the car, and I don't know what started this, but every morning we'd compare notes on who'd slept less. And no matter how many hours I fibbed I had, because I was trying to win, again, this competition, she'd always slept less than I had. I don't know why I always went first. I'm sure she was fibbing too, but just the culture of teenage girls, we were like 17, competing with who was more exhausted, as though it was a badge of honor. And we still do this in more or less extent. And so it's time to drop busy and overworked and overwhelmed and I can do it all and I'm more exhausted than you. It's time to put that down as a means of validating our worth, because that's what it comes down to, right? That's why it's so hard, or one of the reasons it's so hard for us to rest, as women especially. Because from the time that we were little girls, we were told that our worth is based on how useful we are to others, how much we put other people's needs ahead of our own. You know, who here has gone hungry, had to pee for ages, you know, whatever it might be, because you're tending to little ones, your partner, somebody else if you're in a caregiving role. Not peeing for 30 hours once as a midwife, and I was like, oh, that's not okay. But we do it. We get told overtly or through the messaging that we're steeped in that our worth is dependent on how productive we are. And that goes for men as well. We live in a society that is about productivity. So this workshop is definitely not about rest so that you can be productive. This is about rest for rest's sake, because we all deserve that. We all need that. It is our birthright. And so it feels really hard when we think about slowing down and resting. One of the things I often say is, you know, rest is one thing, but rest without feeling guilty about it is a whole nother ballgame, right? Because when we sit down to try to rest, the to-do list is there. The dishes, the laundry, the kids' school activities if you've got kids, whatever it might be, even those of us without children. I don't have children, but I still have a to-do list this long, and the moment you sit down, you feel like you should be doing other things. And sometimes we make it onto that to-do list, but often we're at the bottom and we're like, I'm just gonna get rid of all these other things and then I can rest. But something else always comes in, and then never really comes. Once in a while we manage a bubble bath. Maybe you get to read a book in the morning or at the evening, end of the day. More often than not, we end up turning to our phones and just mindlessly scrolling when we get a moment. And I am guilty of the same thing. I'm not saying that's not something you should do. And more often than not, it's not actually restful. It's turning off, it's zoning out. And we need that too. And it becomes an issue when that's all that we're doing. When we don't give ourselves the time to be at rest without that external input. I'm finding more and more these days that, you know, I talk to people and they're constantly consuming, whether it be Instagram. You know, we can't stop at a red light without picking up our phone and wanting to scroll. We don't do that, please don't do that. But many of us do, right? You're waiting in line for the bathroom, scroll. At the restaurant, if your partner goes to the bathroom and you're sitting at the table, scroll. And we think about, you know, going for a walk, podcast, cooking dinner, podcast, constantly consuming something. And a lot of these things are really great. There's so much great information out there. There's so many amazing podcasts. There's great Instagram accounts. Use these tools and consume them, and find some intention there too. Let your brain be bored. So often we don't give ourselves that space to be bored, because when we do, it feels uncomfortable. If we're listening to a podcast and going for a walk, we're doing something productive. If we're sitting and scrolling, we're taking away the fact that we might be uncomfortable just sitting. Sometimes the discomfort is from that guilt, that fear, that feeling like we should be doing more than we are. And sometimes there's also a real discomfort with sitting and being still, because we're a little bit worried about what we might encounter if we are still. What we might start to feel or think about or acknowledge. When I was speaking to this, I think it was in the very first course I ever made. One of the days was on rest and slowing down and taking time, and I asked, does it feel safe to rest? And most of the women in that course were like, no. And one of them specifically, it's a smaller group, and I had them engage and tell me why it didn't feel safe to rest. And one of the women was like, if I slow down, if I rest, I might actually have to acknowledge the fact that I'm not happy. I might actually have to recognize that this relationship isn't working, or this job is making me miserable, or I got to this point in my life and all of a sudden I realized that I'm living it for somebody else. I got all the things. I got the job, I got the house, I got the 2 kids, I did all the things that society told me I should want. But I feel empty. I feel like I should be happy. Why am I not enjoying this? Why doesn't this feel as good as everybody told me it would? And so I want to give you permission to, as you begin to slow down, as you begin to rest, as you all will start to weave a little bit more, even micro practices, we're going to talk about those, into your days, that there's no rush to act on anything you become aware of when it comes into your awareness. You can recognize a truth, and that can be where it ends. You might recognize a need to leave a relationship. It doesn't mean you have to do it the next day. It might be 3, 4, 5 years down the line, right? You know, there's a conscious decoupling talk here yesterday. I didn't get to see it. I was space holding, but just because you become aware of something doesn't mean you have to act on it. In the healing world, in the spiritual community, often there is this sense of like breakthroughs and like, oh my gosh, you had this big awareness, this realization, this healing moment, and then you got to burn it all down and act on it right away. And that sometimes is true. Sometimes we have these big shift moments. But for most of us, that's not practical, it's not realistic, and it doesn't feel safe for our nervous systems. And so just that permission to take your time. There is no rush. There is never any rush. And you can let your body tell you the speed at which it feels safe to move forward, to travel forward. When I first started moving from midwifery into this work that I do now, I began with a life coaching course, which was supposed to just be self-help. I had a friend who was writing these really beautiful blog posts about these things she was learning in this course she was taking. And I was like, I don't know what you're doing, but I really want to have these experiences. She was writing about savoring and presence and mindfulness, and all of these things were words and concepts that I had an awareness of, but not really. And I asked her what she was doing. She's like, oh, I'm in a life coaching course. I was like, what the heck is a life coach? I had never even heard of one. But it was COVID, and I knew I needed something. I was living alone. I was doing lots of puzzles. Those were great. And working as a midwife more hours than usual, because anytime anyone had a scratchy throat, they had to isolate, and so we were just scrambling to be on. I remember hyperventilating to the point of giving myself an asthma attack in the bath one night because I had 24 hours to go, and I thought that I probably would be able to sleep through them. And then another midwife texted to be like, oh, haha, you're in the bath. I think I posted on Instagram. And she's like, oh, haha. And meanwhile, Jamie has 2 clients in labor, and so is like getting induced. And it was just, I lost it. And so I was seeking something for myself to get myself through. And so I jumped into this life coaching course through the Center for Applied Neuroscience in Toronto because I love science. I love the science and the woo together. At that point, I wouldn't have said I love the woo. I love the science. And then at the same time, because I wasn't coping with the constant demands of being on, I started working with a healer. She was also a coach, and so my brain was okay, like, I can go talk to this woman. She's a coach. This is like, not woo, except that she was an energy healer, and she was a retired midwife as well. And I started to see her because I knew I could go and just be like, this is happening, and she would know, she would understand. She would see me. I wouldn't have to explain. And that's a really important part of community and support, right? Not having to explain ourselves and just being held. And when she told me she was holding her year-long healer's training, wild medicine healer's training, I knew I had to work with her. I didn't believe in energy healing, and I signed up for a year-long energy healing training program. And it was not long after that I started to have all of these awarenesses of the magic that I was missing in life all around me. This sense of connection. The very first weekend I remember practicing this energy healing work. I was in my bedroom and it was on Zoom because it was COVID. I was sitting there like, I'm making things up in my mind. And then I shared what I had seen in my mind's eye with the person I was healing. Before I shared with her, she shared with me what she had felt. And my jaw hit the floor. It's like, there's no fucking way. Like, you've got to be kidding me. That's exactly what I had seen. It was this sense of, okay, there's more here. And along with that program came this reconnection to the earth. There is a deepening into relationship with the more than human world. It's like this whole world that I've been living in just opened before my eyes. And I call it a remembering because as children, we're so connected. I remember leaving notes for the fairies in the clefts of trees in the forest around my home when I was little, talking to the plants, having full imaginary lives that probably they're not that imaginary. And I started to connect in with the seasons. This is a very roundabout way. We're coming back though, coming back to rest, I promise. I started to have an awareness of the shifting of the seasons. And around Easter time, something in my head went, I think there's this thing called Ostera. What's that about? And I looked it up and I was like, oh yeah, Ostera. It's the pagan holiday. It's the spring equinox. It's tied in with Easter, not quite the same time. Obviously, it comes a little bit earlier, but it felt like an epiphany almost. And I was like, I'm going to celebrate Ostera. I'm not going to celebrate this other thing. I was raised without religion. I was an atheist from my childhood on. Although I went through phases of being like, maybe there's something else out there. And it wasn't until I had left my husband that I really started to entertain, like, maybe there's something else out there. But this moment of Ostera was like, I feel connected to the season. It was still snowing outside, but there was light. And so I decorated some eggs and I hung them from pussy willows, and I made a little altar, not knowing at all what I was doing. And by the time summer solstice came around that year, I started hosting Wheel of the Year celebrations and ceremonies. And gathering with women to mark the turning of the seasons became my most profound teacher when it comes to slowing down. Because in the seasons, we have autumn and we have winter. And we live in a culture that is in a state of perpetual spring, summer, spring, summer, spring, summer. Plant, grow, harvest, plant, grow, harvest, like this constant cycle. We don't give ourselves time to go fallow. We don't give ourselves time to winter and rest. And so when I started to think about the seasons and think about the environment around us, everything rests. Nature rests, and she is so abundant. But she couldn't do that if she didn't let the leaves fall from the trees to compost on the ground, to provide protection and nutrients for the seeds that could then bloom after the long rest of winter. And so that was my first real sense of, oh, yeah, we're doing this wrong. We're doing this wrong. And no wonder we're exhausted, and no wonder we're burnt out. Even the most fertile, abundant soil cannot keep producing. We see this in our farms, right? We dump masses of chemical fertilizers on them because we don't give them a chance to have that cover crop that then dies off and returns the nutrients and takes that break, that rest. The other thing that really shifted for me in terms of helping me find permission to slow down, permission to rest, in addition to the cycles of the seasons, was learning a little bit more about my Celtic ancestry and their worldview. And so the Wheel of the Year, it's a modern and ancient calendar. So modern day Wiccans follow this, pagans will follow it. Some of the names for the ceremonies or the points of the year are more modern inventions, and some of them are really ancient. And it is also the calendar loosely, the moments that our ancestors would have followed. If we have European ancestry, it's an ancient agricultural calendar or way of marking time. And what I found out about the Celtic world, and most of my lineage is from Ireland, Scotland, that's predominantly where my people are from, is that in the Celtic world, the day begins when the sun goes down. And the first time I heard that, I got I still get chills through my whole body. That sense that we begin with rest. It doesn't come after everything is done and the day is done. It begins the day. Just like we begin in our mother's wombs. We don't begin out in the world doing things. We begin in that dark, safe, held space of deep rest. And we all have to begin there. So when I learned that about the people who came before me, that when the sun goes down, the day begins, it shifted how I approached not only rest, but how I approached my evenings, and how important that can be, right? That moment of setting intentions, winding down your day, not being on your device if you can, at least for an hour or two before bed, all of those moments, and how sweet that rest became when I got to think of it as like, this is what we do first. This is how we nourish ourselves first. When we think about resting and how to weave it in, the reality is we're all going to go back to our lives, and our lives are probably more full than we would like them to be. If you're here with me, it's probably because your life is more full than you would like it to be. And so how do you start to bring rest into a life that feels like there's barely time to like brush your teeth, let alone have a nap? How many of you feel like you're not nappers or you can't nap? Yeah. That, I believe that all humans are nappers. We all can nap. We all came from napping when we're little. And the reason that we feel like we're not nappers, we actually, a lot of us dislike it, is because of how uncomfortable it feels. It's because of that guilt or that anxiety, that feeling of like fidgety, full body discomfort when we do try to sit down or lay down in the middle of the day. And so if you aren't comfortable napping, that's not where you're going to start when you start to weave rest practices in. It's where you want to get to if you can. And when I say nap, like you could lay down for 5 minutes with your eyes closed. You're not going to fall asleep, but that can be so restful. I know my mom always used to say, I think I got this from my mom. She's a like incredible rester. She is at 10 hours of sleep a night, protected. But I remember when we'd travel and if it was a long travel day, she'd be like, oh, I just need to be horizontal for 5 minutes. And I was like, what's that gonna do as a teenager? I'm like, this is silly, Mom. And then I was a midwife and I was like, oh yeah, like I'll sleep on this couch for 5 minutes in between contractions. They're not my contractions, but I'm gonna pass out, and it makes such a difference. So we can start small, right? We can start with 5 minutes, 2 minutes, horizontal, eyes closed. If your body is tired and you're weaving rest in, finding a form of rest where you are horizontal or supported is so helpful. But if it's your mind that's tired, maybe you got enough sleep and you don't need a nap. Rest can look like meditation. It can look like folding laundry without a podcast on. I like folding laundry. I don't have children. I know that may not be the case for those who have a lot, but some sort of task that's calm and quiet and a bit repetitive, but without those kind of external noises. It can look like breath work, gentle breath work. It could look like a phone call with a friend, right? A good friend, a cup of tea in your backyard. It could look like a gentle walk. It could look like putting on a song and moving your body a little bit. That's not as much traditional rest, but it does shift your energy. It does get you back in your body. anything that brings you back into your body and slows you down can be rest. And when the world feels way too busy and there's not time to stop for even 5 minutes, you always have your breath. There's a quote, and I can't remember who said it. I should have found it and written it down, but they say there's rest in every exhale. And we all have time in our day to exhale. We're doing it constantly. And so just bringing that attention to your exhale, giving yourself 1, 2, 3 luxurious breaths where you're focusing on what it feels like to breathe, and then maybe noticing something with your eyes, something beautiful. You know, the clover flower here. Out your window, perhaps there's a bird in a tree or a glinting of light on a raindrop. Something pretty with your eyes can be really, really restful. And grounding into the earth too. When you breathe, that sense of, yeah, I'm here and I'm on the earth. And that can be enough to bring us back into the moment, into the present.
At this point of the presentation, I dropped the gathering of women into a guided visualization. For copyright reasons, I cannot share that here today as I used music that is copyrighted. However, I have many guided visualizations available for free over on Insight Timer if you feel like you would enjoy dropping into one of these practices today.
In my mentorship program, we have monthly rest circles, new moon rest circles. It felt really short for me. We drop in for a full hour when we do the new moon rest circles. But I wanted to offer you a little taste of that space that we can get into so quickly. And some of you, if you're visualizing rest like that, maybe you go to a beach instead of the woods. My go-to is always the woods, but it might be a beach, it might be a mountain, it might be a cave, whatever calls. Let yourself be right. I didn't talk about witchcraft or the witch wound. I was going to, but it's been spoken to this weekend. I've heard the sister wound come up, and I know that if all of you were at the opening ceremonies, that was spoken to really beautifully. And the sister wound is an aspect of the witch wound, and it's tied into that same reason we don't feel safe to rest, the same reason that we're in this state of busy, the patriarchal systems that we want us exhausted. There's not like one dude out there who wants them, well, probably a few of them, but it's not some conspiracy. It's the system, the system that we have been in raised in, lived in our whole lives. It's so internalized. And it's part of that witch wound too. That's where the competitiveness that I was speaking to comes in, right? That I got less sleep than you. That's one-upping each other, keeping each other down, competing with each other. And this weekend has been so healing, I know, for myself and for so many women, to be in a space where we're here together collectively to take care of one another, to rise. There's so much consideration of each other. And so I want to kind of come to this space of conclusion today in recognizing and encouraging continued community. When I started on my coaching and healing journey, I really was focusing on working one-on-one with women and empowering them to connect with their inner wisdom, to trust their bodies. That was my favorite part of being there's lots of favorites of being a midwife. Babies are pretty cute, but one of my favorite things was always sitting with women, especially in pregnancy, and helping them connect with their bodies and trust their bodies and their wisdom, and advocating for themselves, speaking for themselves, and I'd be there to speak for them too, but really bring them into their power. And so when I embarked on coaching, I wanted to do the same thing. I was like, this is what I'm here for, to bring women into their bodies and let them trust themselves. I am not a guru. I call myself a guide, not a guru. Lately, I'm switching to wayfinder because I really like the idea of finding a way. I have found a way. It's not the way. There are many ways, just a way. And lately, I've been shifting into creating spaces of community. I still do one-on-one work. I love working one-on-one. That intimacy of that connection is profound. And the need that I recognized in my communities was a need for sisterhood, for connection, for coming together and seeing each other and being seen and held and showing up like in all our messy glory, in all of our imperfections. And so creating community through the 2 programs that I run, I have a 6-week course called Unleash Your Inner Witch, which is fun. And I have a year-long mentorship program called the Wise Wild Woman Mentorship. And those spaces have become this lifeline, this sisterhood, this connection, dropping into the wheel of the year and cyclical living. I didn't even touch on living cyclically with our bodies today because we're all in cyclical bodies. And those of us who are cycling hormonally still, and those of us who are not, we can cycle with the moon, but cyclically with the seasons, and then our bodies, and then sitting with each other, coming home to our bodies, to the earth, and to each other is what the work is all about. And that's where rest happens too. Again, witnessing and permission from our sisters. And so I know that all of you are going to walk away from here today with something from the hour we've spent together that you'll be able to share with the women in your life. And the next time you have that thought of, I should be like doing something. I have too many things to do. I'll sit down later. Maybe you'll hear my voice reminding you that it's okay to pause. And maybe you'll give permission to your friends, your mother, your sisters, the other women in your life to slow down and pause as well. Before we close up, does anybody have any questions at all for me? Okay, for those in the back who might not have heard that, past life, green witch, accidentally hurt somebody. Don't want to do that again. Oh my gosh, the guilt. And cut it off. And how do we heal that wound? Forgiveness. And I think with so many things, when we think about forgiving ourselves, it is the hardest thing to forgive. If your dear friend told you they'd done something and it had hurt somebody and they were devastated by it, would you be able to forgive them? Yeah, no problem, right? We can extend so much more compassion to our sisters than to ourselves. And so I would say that a practice of even just writing yourself a letter, and you don't have to believe it right away, because it's hard, it's really hard. But writing those words or saying them and just dropping in, actually, and if you've done if you've done tapping, EFT, it's called emotional freedom technique. It's a beautiful method to work through some difficult emotions sometimes, but one of the things you keep repeating as you go through and say all the things that suck is, I deeply love and accept myself anyway. And so that finding of a way to say, okay, like that happened, and can I forgive her?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
The next question was asked by somebody who was looking for tips for how to slow down other than imagining my voice saying slow down, and who feels like it's not that she's uncomfortable resting, it's just that she really likes going.
For sure, and that's common, right? And I think that, again, there are some of us who are more go-y, and that's okay too. And some of that is conditioned in, and it just feels safer. And so I would say you might want to practice like setting an alarm for a few times in the day. And it could just be an alarm that says, take 3 breaths. Check in. Yeah. You might want to put a sticky note on your mirror or something that's easy to see, like habit stacking. If anybody's read Atomic Habits, it's a great book if you're trying to create a habit. Pairing it with something else you do. So my rest practices, the way that it weaves into my day is, the first one is brushing my teeth. And I really take a moment. I have an electric toothbrush, and I just, in the mornings, I'm like, I'm going to feel this toothbrush on my gums. I remember having a client who was like, but I have to figure out what I'm going to do for the day. I'm like, to-do list while I'm brushing my teeth. Like, your to-do list is still going to be there in 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes. You have to brush your teeth anyway. So a little more of that. When I make my coffee, I intentionally smell the beans before I grind them. I listen to how it sounds. Like, just little moments of using your senses and awareness. One of the practices I do every morning as well, and this is my non-negotiable. It's the one thing that stays the same almost always. As I step outside in the summer, I step into my back porch in the winter, and I ground. I put my feet on the grass when I can, and I say my morning prayer, which is gratitude and calling in my guides. Like, just having little reminders to start, because it takes practice, right? You can have all the good intentions in the world, but it's a new habit, and so having reminders is helpful. Yeah.
How long do you ground?
It depends on the morning. If I have 5 minutes, I like to do 5 minutes. I mean, I'm barefoot all summer, so I do a lot in the summer, but in the morning, it might be as short as 2 minutes. I do some Mayan breathing, which is like a scooping up and bringing down energy, and then my prayer, which typically is, kind of a 2-minute practice, and sometimes that's all I get because I have lots to do or it's cold. But if you can do 5 minutes, and in the winter too, if you can't get out barefoot, hands on a tree. Ask permission from the tree first. They usually say yes, but again, tuning into your body and letting that connection start to build, and hands on a tree is a beautiful way to ground when it's too cold to have our bare feet. One of the healers I trained with has a grounding mat under her desk, and she just filled it with rocks and sticks and soil, and she puts her feet in it when she's working at her computer. Yeah, it's a good one. And you can get grounding mats and fancy things, but yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here with me this morning. What a pleasure. What an honor. Oh, my Instagram is at I am Eileen March. I should say that. I think it's on that card, but it might not be. I don't know. I'd love to connect over there. It's where I hang out social media-wise the most. If you have questions or anything, you're welcome to email me, send me a message on Instagram, and come on over and say hi. And enjoy the rest of our chilly day. Thank you for being up at 8:15 in the morning after the dance.
I hope you enjoyed this special episode of the Woo Curious podcast. As always, please leave a rating, a review, subscribe, comment on whatever platform it is you're enjoying this recording today. And I would love to have you join us inside Unleash Your Inner Witch. The fall cohort, the October cohort, is kicking off Wednesday the 22nd. If you've missed that start date, but you're still wanting to join, there's no worries. You can always jump in after we begin as well. If you have any questions, you know where to find me at I am Eileen March over on Instagram, or email me eileen@myluminouslife.ca. I'll be back next week for a regular episode. Bye for now.